Take it away.
Welcome everyone. We're very, very excited for this opportunity to be able to share our story as well as collaborate with all of you. You know, there's so much to learn, and Ben, the initiative that we all have taken, and Columbus is a great place to see how exciting things everyone is doing. And today we're just going to share some of the achievements that we made and some of the things that we are thinking are going to be beneficial for our journey, and hope to learn so much more from everyone. So the story that we are going to share today is mainly around, you know, from scratch. We started, we had our humble beginning from last May in 2019. And from there, we have deployed 178 bots in less than 12 months, generating over 250,000 hours of work. And today we're going to talk about our Alliance Data's how enterprise-wide view, as well as our strong partnership with IT and making sure that governance and best practices in place helped us get there with being able to scale that fast. And hopefully some of those information and knowledge that we are able to share, you'll be able to replicate in your own ways, in your own organization. So we're very excited about this opportunity. What I will do next is I will introduce our team. So first up, Christian. He's an experienced innovation professional with 15 years of experience in strategic planning, R&D, and data science technologies. After leading our development of digital platform and Alliance Data Innovation Lab, Christian has shifted his focus to 2 years of building a new innovation practice within enterprise data science and analytics organization at the Alliance Data Card Services. Next up, we have Teslyn Reardon. She goes by Tez, and she has been with Alliance Data for about 7 years. Her career has been mostly in data science and forensic forecasting and providing performance metrics and recommendation to partners to drive increased sales. Tez has transitioned into her role with the RPA in early 2019 and serving as the gateway into RPA evolution by setting exploratory meetings to learn more about the processes from the leaders and associates. And Tess received her undergrads from Massachusetts University, and she has an MBA. So she is one of our smartest cookie in the team. Then we also have Tim Steinmans. He is one of our key contributor to RPA from the business perspective. 20 years of experience with the financial services industry, 3 years with Alliance Data. He's currently serving as a risk advisor with our enterprise risk management group with a focus on control, automation, and technology enablement. Some of the things that he has done are business analyst, product owner, customer experience manager, process engineering, operational leaders, and quality and reporting analytics, back office and customer contact teams. Next up, we have another of our business leader with us today. She's going to share some of the success that she and her team has been experienced with robotic process automation in her space. That's Melissa Garner. She is the director of customer experience and has been with Alliance Data for 15 and a half years. During her tenure at Alliance Data, she has also held positions and roles including Director of Complaints Management and Care Center Operations. And the last but not least, Ahmed Hussain. I've been with I have 20 years of IT experience with many different areas. However, process automation has been my key focus and driver for majority of my career. I have been successfully implemented many different process automations across in our organizations, and are working on automation vision and enterprise-wide view with a strong IT and partnership, and achieve real-world results. And we are going to share some of those today. So I will pass the baton to Christian, who is going to give us an overview of our organization and the vision of our automation in our organization.
All right, thanks, Ahmed. So real quick, I want to give you guys a little bit of information about Alliance Data. Often we're one of the largest companies you've never heard of. We are a Fortune 500 payments company. You might actually have one of our cards in your household and may not realize it. We do branded card programs for many of the largest retailers in the United States. We have over 145 brands, and I think if you think of nameplates, I think we have over 200 or 300 nameplates that represents. There's a couple here. Some of the more well-known ones, Pottery Barn, Sephora. Those are a lot of the brands that we have, but we've been in the business for about 30 years. I've been with the company for 18 of those 30, and every 5 years that I've been there, we've doubled in size. So we've always been a fast-growing company. We have been pretty dominant in the loyalty space over the years, and we are focusing more heavily on our payment space, which is the line of business that we're in. So we're in card services. A little bit about our journey and where we started from. Like I mentioned, Alliance has grown, doubled every 5 years for the time that I've been there. And a lot of times the way that we have grown has been building a call center and filling it with people and manually solving every problem. So just throw people at it. And so we've grown very rapidly, but we've grown rapidly in an inefficient way. And so there's been a lot of studies lately, Gartner, McKinsey, Deloitte, they've said statistics, things like you can deploy automation to 30% of your workforce, you can generate 30% efficiency in your operating costs. You can use automation basically to improve some number of your business, 30 to 50%. So we just said 30, sounds great, let's do that. And so what we decided to do was chart out how could we move quickly, how could we gain operational leverage that isn't just always filling every seat with people. It just gets very expensive, and if we double again, there's no way that we could sustain that growth. And so we really focused in on this idea of using automation to help us grow. So we haven't focused on how do I use it to cut costs. We haven't eliminated roles as a result of deploying automation, for example. We've seen this as the driver for how we grow our business for the next few years. What that really meant is we need to get going quickly. So in May of last year, a lot of these decisions kind of happened at the end of 2018. In May of last year is when we officially launched our RPA COE. Obviously, Ahmed and I in the background were working on it for probably about a good 6 months, getting funding approval, getting some governance in place, approvals, that kind of thing. But our first processes went live May of 2019, and then you can see this chart below. We've grown pretty rapidly in that time frame. It's steering committee driven. We centralize a lot of our code, and our steering committee is made up predominantly of leaders within IT, risk, information security, and those parts of the organization. We have a strong partnership with those groups, and we take a very governed approach to every process that we look at. In fact, you could say that one of our guiding principles is if you could do it a different way that's not expensive, do it the other way. So if you can do integration, do integration. If it's a feature in Salesforce or something, go do it that way. If you can't do it that way cost effectively, then let's talk about RPA. So this growth is on top of rejecting large work, right? We've had projects come to us that are quite sizable, made more sense to do a different way. We recommend that they do it a different way. So we've had a lot of governance and using the steering committee to help make decisions and decide when it's right and when it's not. So we've had growth even with that type of view. We've also been very enterprise-wide. So if you looked at the people that are presenting to you today, when we started this work, some of them are all on the same team today, but we were all in different stacks in the organization. We all had different senior leaders, and all those senior leaders agreed top down, this is important and we need to work together to make it happen. And so strong partnership across the enterprise was one way that we got there. Good top-down focus with buy-in from associates was a key part of how we got there, meaning we didn't focus on one group. We tried not to silo the work in one area where we had success. We really tried to meet with accounting and collections and operations and marketing and a risk and analytics groups, and literally anybody that would hear us that had buy-in from leadership. And we tried to find ways we could help them be successful. And so very much how do we help the entire enterprise was a big focus for us. In our first 6 months, we exceeded 100 bots. So we met our goals, and our goals got pretty aggressive pretty quickly. So as we grew, goals got harder, and we just kept going at it as hard as we could, got buy-in where we needed. Anytime we had an obstacle, we used the steering committee to get past the obstacle. So I think leadership buy-in across the organization was a big part of our success. And we focused very much on this idea of like 30% of an associate's day is repetitive manual work they don't enjoy. We really focused in on that idea. We looked at work that would make the associate happier if the work was done in some other fashion. So I'll give you a very light example. In collections, you tend to get paid based on how much you collect. There's a lot of administrative back office work that you have to do to make that job work. Collectors would rather collect, right? They get paid on collecting. So we automated a lot of that administrative back office work, which let them make more calls, which allowed them to make more money. And so they got much happier about the work they were doing. And so we had a lot of great buy-in from associates, and we wanted to make sure we targeted the work that the associates would feel good about. And some of the use cases that some of our partners, Tim and Melissa, are going to share, have that focus as a key part of the work. Before I jump to another slide, are there any questions? I saw some little pings coming up.
Yeah, we've got 2 questions, Eric, from Eric Carlson. When you say 100 bots, do you mean 100 processes automated or 100 high utilization execution bots?
100 high utilization execution bots. So I think that's maybe 12 processes in that 100. We try to focus, and you'll hear that a little bit later, on processes that are 10,000 hours or more. So a single process for us may have 3 bots in it, but it'll be more than 10,000 hours of work. We try to maximize the utilization. In fact, that's one key metric that we present to the steering committee every month, is what is our utilization rate. And if there's if we don't have a high utilization, we consider it an issue and we address it. So we have, I think, one process that's currently out of our threshold for that. And it is a recurring conversation about what do we need to do to increase utilization. So we focus on the bots being busy all the time. That's not always true because there's some system dependencies, but that's the number of bots, super high utilization, and the number of processes. Some of them might need 50 bots to make the process work. I think we have a couple that are 25, 30, 50 bot processes.
Okay.
And what's the other question?
And split between unattended and attended?
It's a great question. So Ahmed might be able to speak to a little bit better, but we are almost entirely focused on unattended bots. We have tried attended, and we've had some challenges with how you get value from it. So what you'll hear from us is we were very value focused. We have to be able to recognize the value. If we're going to deploy bots, if we're going to buy a call center to do X process, right? CCPA, I think, is one that we might talk about. That's a net new process for us. You know, there were fears about how much hiring you needed to do to support it. Let's look at how bots can do that activity and drive value. And the challenge that we've struggled with attended bots is getting the associate to fully execute the bot in a way that you can recognize that value. And so that's been a challenge for us. We haven't cracked that nut. We do have it as an open item for us to figure out how we can make that work better. We're partnering with UiPath, who is our provider. We're partnering with some other companies too that we have relationships with, Cognizant even, that has success there. So unattended has been where we focused. We do think there's opportunity in attended. We just haven't been successful at that yet. And I think there's one more question.
There's a bunch of questions.
Okay.
They deal with kind of what areas you focus on. I think that's probably going to be in an upcoming
yep.
where you actually spent the time. And then there's probably one question here. When you just said go RPA versus go API, was there kind of like a clear decision tree?
Yeah. So yes, and you'll see when Tez talks that there's a little bit of how we source the ideas. One of the ways that we source the idea is that it fell below the line for IT. Either there are not enough IT resources to do the work, but it might be valuable, but you know, you got to make a priority list, and it might be worth doing, but there aren't enough resources now to do it, and maybe it needs to happen now. And so that might be an RPA versus API conversation where the best way to do this would be to deploy against, you know, I don't want to pick on Salesforce. I just use that name because everybody knows Salesforce, but maybe it's write code to the Salesforce API and just bust it that way. But that team has, you know, 10 other things on their list, and they may not be able to assign resources to it. So if they can't do it and prioritize it in the timeline and the dollar value that makes sense, we will look at it for RPA if it crosses our threshold. And there is a lot of play between what is their threshold and our threshold that allow us to be profitable in that space. Because UiPath makes it easy to deploy the code quickly and efficiently. There are times where it might not make sense for a full development team to go work on, but we can work on it and still achieve our goals. There's a lot of space there. So we've had success in that. But again, if it can be integration, it should be integration. And I think Ahmed will speak to that a little bit more. I'll go ahead and continue, and then I think those questions will come up with other people's content if that works.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of, we did have to have a vision, and there was a lot of strategy behind how we chose to go about doing things the way we did them and got the scale that we got. So our vision was to deliver cost-effective, high-quality solutions leveraging smart automation technologies to automate business processes. That's all a bunch of jargon, right? The key problem is we need to get value right away. And we are a large organization that has a lot of tech debt. And not only do we have a lot of tech debt, but like I said, we've grown with people. And so if we want to deploy RPA, our normal way to solve it would be find a bunch of people that know how to use RPA, hire them, and then throw the problem at them or throw them at the problem. And we recognize that that would take us a year or more to get success, maybe 2-3 years actually to get where our goals are. So a lot of this vision was we need to do this, we need to do it now, and it needs to be scaled right away. And so that was who do we partner with? Because we're not gonna be able to do it on our own. Who is the best software provider, which is, between Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, UiPath, all the other solutions, which one gets us there the fastest? We have a lot of Python developers. We have a lot of data science people who could write complex code that could do a lot of this work, but recognize that the speed at which we needed to do it and the strength that it needed to be wasn't going to be there. So, who do we partner with? How do we do it? That was a big driver for us. So efficiency, effectiveness. We wanted to improve customer experience and associate experience. So what is the repetitive manual processes was a focus for us. How to reduce risk, that was a big piece, and you'll hear some other people's content tackles that. Achievements, where 1% is 100 bots or more, we achieved that within 6 months within UiPath. And then you'll hear more, but the 250,000 hours, that number is actually low. It was higher than that. That's just the number that made it to the deck. And that's an actualized number. That's not a projection. That's not an annualized number. We hit actually a slightly higher number than that in actual hours of value delivered. And again, that's scaled work. So all of that, every hour of that work was equal to or better than an hour of a person doing that work in terms of value. And I think at this point, we're almost at 4 million transactions just since May. So, we're even moving so fast that we're starting to double the numbers that you're seeing in this deck. With that, I'm going to assume there are no more questions, or at least let the rest of the content get to them, and I'll hand it to Tez. Tez, are you on?
Here I am.
All right.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, so this is a TES talk, not to be confused with a TED talk, since Christian called that out. So just we'll talk a little bit about my role. So my role on the team is kind of the gatekeeper and the explorer to make sure to reach out to the business partners to learn about the processes, but to also make sure that we're working on the right processes. Probably the most difficult part of my job, though, is to keep everybody else on this call in line. So I sometimes feel like I should get a raise just for that. But to go along with that part of my job, I'm also doing the reporting. So the numbers that Christian is reporting about, numbers of hours collected and savings and things like that, I'm also doing a weekly report to our senior leadership team to track against our goals as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the major part of my process, which is the intake process. So we have an intake form that we do have on our SharePoint site. So if there are people within the business that have an idea that they think they want to have automated, they can put it through the intake form. There's an email that comes to me, and then I have to reach out to that person and kind of get some more information about the process. What does it look like? How many hours does it take a person to do it? Is it a routine process? But really, a lot of the processes that I find have come organically. So it's either come through a side conversation with some like, oh, this process is really painful. And I'm like, well, we do automation. And they're like, well, tell me more about it. So it's the first part of my career in RPA, I will say that because I've only been doing this about a year, but the first part of my job has really been building relationships across the business. So finding all the leaders across the business who feel like they've got teams that are doing a lot of repetitive manual, labor intensive work. It's taken them 20 hours to do something which if we could find a way to make that more efficient, those are the people that I'm talking to. So that's really been the first part of half of my job, is just finding people that are doing processes that they may or may not like today. And then determining from there, okay, let's talk about it more, and telling them more about RPA as well. So what is RPA? How does it work? What kind of processes are ideal for an RPA project? So again, I'm telling them, okay, I'm looking at the hours. I'm looking at, make sure it's a standard process. As many of you probably know, telling them an RPA bot is basically mimicking a person. So whatever a person does is what that bot is going to do, except we don't want the bot to make decisions. So any point where someone has to pick one versus the other based on this kind of human knowledge, we always say that's usually a process that we're probably not going to be able to do unless we do some process tweaking. So that's where I'm having a lot of conversations across the business with leaders, with associates, trying to get them on board with RPA to understand what it is and how it's going to help them out. Another way that we were looking at it too is, once I kind of got through those organic conversations, we would sit down with an org chart and say, here's all of our VPs across the company, and then look to see, okay, which teams have at least 50 people on that team? Because if there are 50 people, then you like to think that there's probably some overlap of processes on those teams. There might be some larger processes on those teams, so that we can then go after some of those processes. And what we try to tell them is, we're looking to help you do the parts of your job that are more valuable versus just the parts of your jobs that are tedious. So that's kind of one way in there, is to say, we're not trying to take your job. What we want to do is we want to find those places where you want to, the valuable part of your job where you could do more often. If you could do it more often, that's what you would rather be doing, versus this job over here that, may take a lot of your time, but it's not really adding any value to the work. And then, as Christian mentioned, the below the line work request. So as we say, we really would rather automate a process somehow through any type of integration versus just throwing RPA on top of it. So as he's saying there, if there's anything that goes through our work request, through the enterprise-wide kind of project list, they go through that, and there's these projects that come below the line. So what that means is it's probably not going to be prioritized within that year. And we've also tackled some processes that we went back and looked, and they'd been on the list since 2018, 2017, 2016. So we said, okay, are there any of those processes that we could potentially jump in and help on, and be able to take those processes on and work through those so that they do get done this year versus being pushed to 2021 or 22 again. So we're trying to, find those processes that we could to jump in and help right away, and maybe not have to spend so much time and money on in the future. So, so from that, we're basically, again, I'm using that time to go through all the processes, make sure that they make sense for automation, but then also scheduling shadow sessions. So what we're scheduling shadow sessions with our developers, so that they can understand, does the process work, or how does it work, so that we can be sure that a bot could actually do the work that same person is doing. Like, we've come across processes where sometimes if you try to go to a third-party website, and it may pop up to say, a bot can sign in with its own username and password, but if it says kind of the bot questions like, okay, I need you to pick all 3 cars in these pictures, a bot can't do that. So if we have any sort of process like that, we have to either find a way to get around that, or we may have to have a change of process or something to have that happen. So we're basically looking for things like that would cause us to say, no, we couldn't do this through a bot. And then once we do that feasibility, what we're going to do is pass that on to our steering committee. We have a steering committee. We were doing about monthly, bi-weekly, but whenever we need our steering committee of leaders to come together to prioritize or approve the processes that we've looked for in order to move those forward through development. So what you can see here, if you look at the bottom, the RPA pipeline, just of kind of how we've intake our processes, and then how many we've actually pushed through to the ending of the processes and into development. So currently, over the last year, we've had about 200 plus ideas that have come through intake. So a lot of those, again, came through that intake form, or some version of myself having a conversation, or Christian or Ahmed having conversations with leaders or people across the business. And they said, hey, I think this sounds like something good for automation. As you can imagine, 200 plus ideas, some probably about, 10 to 20% of those probably are not good processes for RPA, but, people put them through because they just didn't know at the time. Or maybe there's some other way that we can think about doing that. Is there another approach that we could try, that we could find another place in the business to take care of it? we probably had about 100 business processes that we've evaluated, meaning we've had those further conversations, having like just a 30-minute call to discuss the process. What are the pain points? How long does it take people to do the process? How many times are you doing this process? You'd be surprised how many processes someone says, oh my gosh, we do this 30 times a year or 30,000 times a year. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, wait, we really have to be able to find a way to help you out with that process. Since about last week, we've had about 50 processes that we've shadowed with our developers. So we've gone through the process of actually sitting down and going step by step through the process, every single click, every single, keystroke, anything that we're doing, they're watching that, they're recording that process, and then going back and watching it to make sure that it is a process that can be automated. And then now we've got to a 25 plus.
We're at 35. The red is because I didn't correct it.
I was like, wait a minute, I thought we talked about this. So we're at 35.
I'm sorry.
Technically 25 plus is correct, but we're at 35 plus now. Processes that we've actually moved into the steering committee and we have approved. And now all of these processes are either in production, in requirements, or we've actually have launched those processes. So the good thing for me, I think the thing that's changed for me the most over the last year or something, where the changes I've seen, you can see we've got the top-down approach, which is driven by our organizational goals. And usually it's a leadership down, kind of telling people, hey, you need to look at automation a little bit more, or the bottoms-up approach where the associates are saying, hey, I really want to do this. For me, I believe it started off with the leader saying, oh, go talk to X, Y, and Z person about this. They didn't really know that much about automation. And so the associates talked to me about what they wanted to automate. We came up with all this great list of 200 ideas. But now what I've seen is, now that we've got some people, and you'll hear from Tim and Melissa later, now that we've gotten some traction and we've got some wins and we've got some champions on our side, now I've got leaders coming to me asking me, hey, will you set up a meeting with this person on this team, with this person on that team? Because I really think these are processes that we should consider for automation. So now the leaders have bought in, and I think that's been really helpful for us, that makes us successful. I had a director in the care center reach out to me today with 3 new processes that are about 35,000 transactions a month. So, they're really starting to see the success, and they're starting to hear the stories from other teams and the associates that are really enjoying those bots and how it's really helped them do their jobs better. And what we're trying to do now is, whereas before we were trying to drive just the sheer number of hours, we're trying to deflect hours. But now we're also finding that there's other opportunities for us to help lower fraud costs, help to increase the quality of some of the products that we're putting out, help to lower the error rates of reporting or of other activities that we're doing that, just it's human nature. We're going to make a mistake. A bot's not going to make a mistake as long as you've got it set up correctly. So we've really come a long way with getting people and building those relationships and getting people to come on board, to where now we've kind of got our own ad hoc marketing team that's out there talking about RPA. And then helping to funnel even more processes into our list, so that we can continue to, my job is basically to keep the developers busy. So that's what I'm trying to do, is keep processes coming in their way as much as I possibly can. So
we want to take some questions for Tez, and there will be Q&A at the end if we have. I think there's a lot more questions coming in, and so we can move some of them to the Q&A if needed.
Yeah. Tez, when you keep track, do you use a tool, or do you have an Excel spreadsheet? How do you keep track of your pipeline and the benefits?
So right now it's a spreadsheet. So I get the information from the developers team, from UiPath. They're sending us the information, how many bots transactions were run this week. We are working on a new tool. I believe it's part through UiPath Insights we'll be using, so that we can track some of those. But yeah, that's a very good question. That was something that took us a little bit to figure out, like, how exactly are we going to do the volumes? How are we going to share the value across the business? There's a couple other ways that we're looking to do that, because as I said, we're not just going to look at deflection of hours, but now we're also going to look at how much cost are we saving? How many fees have we now, fees or fines that we haven't gotten because we did something correctly? Like, what are some of those things that we're saving because of the we're not making mistakes like we were before? So that's probably the next iteration of that report, is to follow those things.
Okay. Have you all developed any ballpark sort of like orders of magnitude that say how much it costs to do each of these bots or processes, things like that? Do you have developed any heuristics yet?
I can answer that. I can't share the exact number, but we do know what the cost per hour is for every activity that we are deploying a bot for. Mm-hmm. And hold on a second. picking up static there. We do know what each process costs us per hour based on the associates and the scale and so on in the role. And then we do calculate based off what we pay for development costs plus UI path licensing plus infrastructure costs. We have a cost basis per bot hour that we calculate. So we look at it as here's what the hour is for a person to sit there in a seat and do it. Here's what the bot hour is in order for us to get that work done. And those numbers are dramatically different than each other. One is 4 to 5 times cheaper than the other, and you can imagine which one is cheaper. But it varies greatly by the work too, right? So some work that we automate might actually be activities that happen offshore. So the rate isn't as high, but it's still more cost effective to do RPA. Some are onshore, let's call them core associates that maybe they're an hourly role. And so it's still an order of magnitude difference in cost. And then some of them are situations where you might normally need to hire highly skilled, talented developers to do that work at the scale. It may not be work that's optimal for that person to do, but you might be paying someone significantly more to do that work. In that case, that might be anywhere from 10 to 100 times cheaper to do a bot. We have some legal use cases, for example, you know what a lawyer costs, it's not cheap. Some work can be done by the bot to make sure the lawyers are focused more on the value add that the lawyer does and less time on the paperwork side, right? So it depends on the process, but all of them are significantly cheaper to do RPA, and some of them are 10 to 100 times different in cost.
Got it. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think the others will be covered when you get more technical details about the actual execution. Is there a structure process to blueprint the end-to-end process to determine automation opportunities? Is there a certain methodology?
I think that's an Ahmed question. I'll defer to you.
You're on mute, Ahmed.
Yes, that is something that we consider as to, you know, what is the development cost, what is the support cost, and understanding all of those from end to end is a criteria as we take on the new request and select that for our automation delivery.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. And I'd encourage the Alliance data team, if you could just keep an eye on the chat, and if you can answer it just in the chat, that'll keep the flow of conversation going.
Terrific. So
I have an administrative question. If I open chat, will it show up on the screen? Because I can answer questions while they're talking.
It will.
Yeah.
Christian cannot answer.
All right, keep going.
So the next set of slides I will cover. One of the key things that I want to convey is, you know, what our delivery practices. Tez, in her first slide, she talked about how she does the intake, the later part of delivery. It's not a rocket science. It's just like any other IT delivery, what happens. And we follow those practices very, very closely. We're making sure that it has the proper SDLC process in there. We have a proper change control process in there. One of the key things, the differentiator that I think was for us is understanding that to raise a baby, you need a village, right? You need a village to raise a baby, and RPA was no different. This is a term that was coined by Tim, who's in our speaker list. But you guys can see the different teams that we need to work with on a day-to-day basis, figuring out, you know, what we need to do, how do we move the initiative forward, and all of their participation actually makes the needle move. If any one of these participants were not on our side to move things forward, we would not be able to move at the scale that we have been able to move. You know, some of the key call out goes out to our information security partners. They are actually tied to our hips and help us evaluate process if a given process is introducing any new risk to the solution that we already are doing in a manual way. The enterprise architecture kind of also be one of our key partner who's helping us see what sort of tech debt are we generating, and what we need to think about as we do some of the automation in the future. I know the question came up a couple of times in terms of when do you want to do RPA versus integration? So when we are even looking at the RPA solution, we're looking to say, if the APIs are available for integration, we would want to use RPA with the API. If the direct database connections are available, we would take that over that. And then our last option is how associates are working, where it's doing the web scraping technology and going in and filling that information from there. So and a lot of times, if the API do not exist for those different systems, and it takes much more time to go ahead and build that, RPA makes a good interim solution for us to go build it, where it gives the IT a little bit of breather and plan out what they need to do to build the more robust solution in the long run. So these are some of the teams that we work on a day-to-day basis. In our next slide, we are going to talk about what we have been able to achieve. This is our highlights. So we have 17 processes that are in production. One question that came up in our breakout group is, how do we deal with a lot of how do we deal with the support or changing of interfaces? So since our approach has been, if we can go to the data source by API or databases, we are going there. And then our last preference is to go with the interface. So that's one thing that worked for us. Another thing that worked for us also is we went after some big processes where lots of bots are working rather than many process, and which in RPA by nature is brittle in some ways. So those things also have prevented us and protected us. There are quite a few items that are already in our development, and a lot of those are going to be deployed in August and September to meet our high target for 2020 and plan for our 2021. There are 178 active bots with a pretty high utilization. And as Christian mentioned, at the time of we put the deck together, it was at 250,000 hours of realized value, but it's much higher. On the slide, on the charts, what you get to see is the areas of the organization we are working with, where most of the items come from, and we are working very heavily with our back office as well as collections organization, enterprise risk and ITNO and accounting. Those are a few of the other areas. We have done some in our accounting and finance. Typical RPA use cases are notorious with our accounting and finance use cases. So that's one of the areas that we will be working with our organization next. Things that are in development, similar concept, again, heavy on collections as well as back office. And for our future of automation, where we would need to leverage OCR, ICR, and take advantage of machine learning, we are seeing, again, back office is leading the way, and legal use case where Christian just kind of alluded, where the legal counselors, they're high dollar resources, and if we have them go find a specific information from a contract and in a tedious manual way, it takes a lot longer time, versus RPA can actually make their task much easier, where they can figure out where they need to look at and quickly make the decision on that. So we'll talk about some of those things in our later slides. We'll go to the next slide and talk about what is our delivery methodology and how do we do this thing. So we see that our RPA automation, intelligent automation, a three-legged stool, and for it to be providing a stable structure to RPA, it works with Alliance data with a vision, Alliance data with the leadership support and all the great resources that come together with our service partner Cognizant, who has been a tremendous help to help get it growing. I believe I saw a question as what does a development team look like? We have a total of 30 some odd resources on the team who are doing the requirements, who are doing the development, design, build, and test, as well as support. So we have about 4 resources who are dedicated to support. There are a couple of resources who are dedicated on gathering requirements, and a large number of resources are in the development of RPA, as well as we are calling it RPA++ or hyper automation who are looking at advanced use cases and figuring that out. UiPath is a solid partner for us who brings us the industry expertise as well as helping us share what sort of things that we could do to scale our best practices. One of the things that we just worked with our UiPath partner is helping to get the citizen development discussed, and how do we do this in our organization next. So we'll talk about that in the future slides. Any questions so far?
There's a bunch of questions. Let me just throw out a couple here that let's see. What criteria do you follow to decide if there's enough value in RPA as an immediate solution now versus working on a more permanent long-term solution?
So one of the criteria that some of the criteria that we follow, and we will go over that in our later slides, are, is the process not changing very frequently? Is that decision driven, and there is not a lot of fluctuation of or things that require various different kind of decisioning on that. So those are the process variability are concerned. So those are some of the things that we do, and pretty much everyone does that as well. So the piece that we also look at is how big and what kind of value that the automation is going to generate. We have a pretty high target that we need to hit for the year as well, and what that does to us is we have to look at in terms of either the hours deflection or in terms of the kind of penalties or error rates that we are able to prevent. Those are criteria that we use. In terms of the hours generate, we look at something as big, at least as big as 8,000 to 10,000 hours of annual benefit that bring us. So that's some of the things that we do. In this slide, what we are essentially trying to share is what is our secret sauce. And you have already heard some of those things from Christian as well as Tez. Having the automation vision, you have to have the vision to know where you're going and how you're really going to get there. Leadership buy-in is paramount. You have to have their leadership buy-in. It's been months before we launched our RPA process. We was communicating with the leaders to say what the benefit is going to be, and understanding them and getting their buy-in and getting it off the ground. Enable the automation village that we looked at, working with the different IT partners and bringing them together and making them part of your solution, making them as your advocate, where they can say RPA can do this. If IT is taking 12 to 18 months to get there, we can have an interim solution with RPA, and that is one of our criteria to say, do we want to do this with RPA versus if the process is going to change in less than 3 months or 6 months, then we do not want to do that. We want to follow the traditional IT process where the more robust solution is going to come very soon. Things needs to be business driven, and we have a couple of our business speakers in our call today, and it needs to be IT partner supported, making sure that it follows the ITSM practices and delivery practices with the documentations and such. Having the enterprise view with the evangelization of the automation. Tez has done a phenomenal work where she was going out and reaching out to different parts of the organization. Now the organization has seen the success, and they're coming back to us and saying, we want to do the automation. How can we get in that pipeline? So having the robust pipeline is one of the secret sauce to have it going, because with that, you can really plan out to say, how many resources do we need? And the having a large team of 30 plus resources doing development, support, and delivery comes from the high value pipeline, and making sure that we are able to deliver on those values with the value driven agenda, and regularly reporting back to the organization.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that real quick, to give you an idea of the scale at which Tez may have been out meeting with members of the organization. I think I looked at in the first year, she met with over 60 teams. So that's presentations, meetings, talking to senior leaders. There was over 60 of them. And those made themselves led to 2 or 3 meetings as follow-ons. So that list of 200 was a lot of effort to build that list. And you'll see that, when you think of 35 development resources and you go, wow, that's a lot, right? We didn't start there. We started with the 10, and the pipeline was one number. And then the pipeline got so big that we got authorization for increasing size number of developers to the team, basically to eat the pipeline. At one point, I think the presentation of leadership was, it would take us 15 years to work all of the things that have come to us from the pipeline. And so the ask back was, well, if I gave you more resources, how much can you do? How much can you do? How much can you do? And so why the pipeline drove it, it drove the reason why the team is so large. It drove everything because it kept getting bigger, 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 and she kept finding value in it. And so we kept needing to ask for more to eat the pipeline, let's put it that way. And so it was very much about how do we get the work done and what is necessary to do it. And as long as the work is worth doing, the resources are there, because it's cheaper to do it this way than maybe it is to build a call center. So I want to make it clear the scale at which Tez's work drove what's happening in the development it can't be underestimated enough.
Yep. I see that there was a question about, what's the team size or the pod size. So we have 3 pods. Each pod from our service provider, Cognizant, is about 10 resources. But at any given point in time, each one of the pod is going to deliver somewhere from 3 to 4 processes. So having of large processes, and then 4 to 5 medium processes. So since we have 3 pods working all in parallel, we have about 12 to 16 processes that are in development, which we are working on right now. All right.
I see a lot of questions. Do we want to jump to content, and then I'll ask members of my team to answer in chat if that works?
I think that's probably
Let's do that.
and I think there's a lot of content to cover, so keep
That's
going.
right. So Ahmed, if you want to hand off and then try to get through some questions in chat, if that works.
Yes. Next, we will have Tim Stymons, who's one of our business leader. I introduced. He brings wealth of information and knowledge from the financial industry. So Tim has been instrumental on installing a few of our key solutions early on. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all still awake. You can tell by the chat that I think everyone pretty much is. So I'm here to share a couple of business use cases with you. This first one, I'm not going to talk very much about the process, but I want to just set up what the business challenge was. In our back office, we've got a process of where we get a request for information from our customers around their credit bureaus, right? How we report to their credit bureaus. We take that intake process, we create a case in our backend system, and then the non-bot sort of process was the associate needs to go out and do a bit of pre-work around that case before they can actually start to answer the customer's question. So that pre-work is, they would go out to each one of the 4 credit bureaus that we report to. They grab a snapshot of that customer and that account's perspective. They'd save it into our case management system. And that process they did on every single case takes about roughly 5 minutes per case to do. And there's no value in that process other than the snapshots they use in their analytical perspective. So the really RPA challenge was, how could we take that necessary work, but really non-value from an analytical perspective, away from the associate and have a bot do that? And so we built a process where we had the bot really look into that sort of case management queue, pick out cases that still needed to be worked using some filtering and prioritization, time-bound mostly. Go out to each of those credit bureaus, log in, search for that customer and the credit bureaus, grab the snapshot and paste it into our internal system. Then they would also queue that case up to the next queue for an analyst to pick it up. We also programmed into that a sort of throttling or freshness mechanism. So the snapshot needs to be fairly fresh toward real time when that analyst is looking. And so we built a mechanism that kept pace with the work queue. So the bot didn't get too far ahead in terms of filling snapshots. So what that was able to do, we had about an 8-week development timeframe. That timeframe is really from sort of requirements and sort of design sessions through development and UAT. We launched this, and what you see, the visual in the lower left hand of this slide, the blue is the associate sort of volume, the orange is the bot, and you can see within a 30-day window, the proportionality of that work shifted dramatically. In the lower right-hand corner, you see just a sample of a verbatim from an actual associate out there. They viewed this as a huge win, really 2 dimensions, right? One is it's work that they didn't have to do as pre-work, right? Made their work cycle a lot more enjoyable, and they could spend more time doing the value add, which is analyzing the customer's issue and what is being reported, do that sort of ticking and tying and sort of matching. And so they were actually able to solve customers' issues at a more rapid pace by removing that work. We move to the next slide. So different business challenge, right? And I saw in the chat window that there was something around how do you think through this in a COVID-19 sort of world. So here's the business challenge. So one of our contact channels is an email channel where a customer is sending us an email with a variety of context, right? COVID-19 hits, they're still using that email channel, but the complexity of all the different programs and issues change dramatically within that context channel. The customer conversation becomes much more complex. So it's not just as simple as, hey, I answer the customer's email in 1 or 2 responses. It becomes a very heavy sort of time-bound. We provide a little bit of information, which prompts another question, which then provide a little bit more information and prompts another question. So very inefficient from a customer experience perspective. So what we decided to do from a strategy perspective was try to shift those type of context to a customer channel that would have been much more efficient, a voice channel, right? And so we did some of that programmatically, but we utilized the bots to really help from a back-end system perspective. So as we were shifting the content over, we would use the bots to leave particular notes that we requested to shift to a different channel, helped with sort of the back-end process. What that did from a success story perspective was really, I think, remarkable given the scale. We were able to, within a 48-hour window, really shift almost 70,000 accounts from one channel to another channel very seamlessly, allowing that email channel to get back into their proper SLA, service level agreement is what SLA stands for, while simultaneously improving that customer experience for those complex interactions. How we did it is equally remarkable, right? So we brought together really cross-functional teams. We sort of broke out of the sort of standard intake process that Tez was walking us through earlier in this presentation. We rapidly sort of got together. We worked in a very agile fashion using that sort of RPA village that you also saw about. And we were able to go from initial problem to deployed solution within 5 business days. So really, I really can't emphasize enough how having that RPA village and having folks that are really get it and are excited about it and are engaged and willing to remove barriers helps from a speed of execution. We could move on to the next one. So the next one is ACDV. It's a fancy acronym, stands for Automated Credit Dispute Verification. It's very similar to the first use case I was going with a major difference. We call these internally an indirect credit bureau inquiry, basically. Customer has gone out to their credit bureau. They've one of those four. They've looked at their credit in that credit bureau, and they pose a question to us. Those credit bureaus have a consolidated method of you can pose the question right in the credit bureau pane. That's get consolidated through a system called eOscar, and we work that, and it requires a lot of data input. So generally, in the case, what we do is an associate would data input somewhere between 50 and 135 fields. Some of it, they would be doing some data translation on the fly. Now, I'm sure as I just explained that, you all are going, what? What? How can that be, right? That amount of data input with the sort of data translations on the fly is hugely inefficient and very error prone. And you're absolutely right, it is. So what we were able to do is use an unattended bot to really look at that queue, again, take that queue using some prioritization methodologies, time again being one of them, sort of first in, first out sort of perspective, look up that account in our core sort of servicing systems, automate the data entry of that. There's also a comparison in that interface with eOscar of actually comparing what the credit bureau is saying for that data element and what our core system is saying. And there's a match different sort of analysis going on. The bot is also doing that, right? And then it's also routing it into another work queue for the actual analyst to go in and basically consume all that data and answer the customer's questions. So the successes are, again, the human element, right? Very not fun to do that level of data manipulation and input. The data quality was a huge win. And then there's also an efficiency play, right? Because they don't have to spend the time to do that data entry of 50 to 135 data elements, which allowed them to reposition the staff and to add some additional quality or risk mitigation tasks to existing processes. Across all three of these business cases, I really want to point out that the goal here was not to displace associates, right? Our strategy from an RPA perspective is not to eliminate jobs, but it's to change the quality of the jobs being operated. And this is a great example, as were the other ones, of really removing high friction, low value work that an associate is doing that doesn't really require that supercomputer between our ears, right, to do the work, and allowing the associates to really function in those types of process that we really need to use our cognitive abilities to execute against.
Well, and Tim, to your point, this is Chris. I think it was a huge associate satisfier because, you know, taking all that mundane out of the way allowed them to focus their time on the actual decision making that still needs to occur after all those fields are entered. So, you know, it's not quite so mentally draining to deal with all those data elements and then decide what you need to do with really why you're even working it, which is determine the right resolution for the dispute. So yeah, beyond the FTE save and the accuracy save, I think it's been, you know, something associates have been glad to see this stuff taken off their plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a common occurrence in meetings that I have with folks that are trying to learn more about RPA of the ideas are really starting to accelerate and be generated by those associates that are saying, hey, what about this? This, you know, would be better if I didn't have to do this, allowing me to focus on that. So we're getting some of that sort of citizen identification of ideas. So that's it for me. I hope I didn't put you to sleep. I'm going to hand you off to Melissa Gardner for a couple more business cases.
So this is Christian, I want to call out real quick since we're at 5:30. We'll have Melissa give her cases. There were a couple more slides. We will skip those last slides and we'll jump straight to questions after Melissa. That way we can get to all the questions because I know the list has been growing. So if everyone's okay with that, that's the direction we'll take, and I'll hand it to Melissa.
Okay, great. So I'm going to cover a few items we did in our risk management offices for complaints management. So the goal for external case intake was we were wanting to eliminate tedious time-consuming processes that were subject to human error and automate them with RPA. The automated case retrieval, capture, and creation of all processes on external incoming web-based case sources. So the work this team does was with our regulators, the CFPB and the Better Business Bureau sites. So we created a way for the bots to go out and capture all the incoming work that is highly regulated. It has very specific due dates. So it needed to be very specific on the dates that came in, the customer information, and the individual complaint that came in. And we automated the bot capturing all that information and putting it into Salesforce for us. So that was a very good use of the bot. It was an unattended bot capturing that information, and we were able to remove all human aspects of that. And so that was great, and we could move those resources to other high-risk work within our team. The next was document fulfillment. I talked about this for a quick second in our breakout room. This was actually the first thing we tackled on our team and not the intake. The reason we tackled this first is the goal for this was our team, before they can do any of this work, they had to tediously go to 15 different systems to capture all of the investigation resources. So we automated the case retrieval, capture, and creation of all processes on external incoming web-based case sources. So the bots would go out to our 15 systems, capture all that documentation, and put it into the Salesforce for us. And so I think I just read the wrong slide. We have 15 sets, so we validated customer information and attaching the necessary information. So it's the precursor for complaint responders and their core job function. And our associates were so excited about that. We got them to actually embrace the RPA process, and they started giving us more ideas for other items. And so this was a very good increase on our morale, it increased data quality, and it was a significant reduction in our process time for our productivity. So this was a big win for our team and the first item that we captured. Next was case assignment. So after we had intake and then fulfillment, we utilized the bots to look at a case assignment model and a PTO calendar. So after those two steps were done, the bots would then assign all of the cases to our team. The great part about this was it would systemically assign all the casework, and what this did for us was it ensured we were continually meeting all of our SLA achievement, and it repositioned all of our staff and allowed us to work through all of our workflows. So with the regulators, we do have a tight deadline on all of our work, and it allowed us to continually meet all of our casework, and so we didn't miss any deadlines. And so the bots, we did all of our assignment. We were able to move, our supervisors were doing that. We were able to take that off our supervisor's plate and move them to other high risk work within the team. They were, instead of assigning work to our associates, they were actually being able to spend more time looking over high risk work with our associates. So that was great. And one other thing I wanted to add on here, our team was so excited about the bot work. We even had a couple associates that took upon themselves to start looking for other ideas for programming, and they even programmed some ideas themselves before introducing it to Ahmed and the team. And they programmed the complete ideas and then introduced it to the team and introduced it to Cognizant and the team. And so that was pretty neat that they even on their own time programmed the ideas and then presented it. So we've had a high adoption of RPA on the team. So it was very successful.
So I know we have a couple of items that Ahmed wanted to go through. In the interest of time and giving opportunity for questions, I'm going to ask Ahmed to work his, as cleverly as possible, work the rest of the content into the answers to the questions. And then what we'll do then is we'll jump to Q&A. That way there's enough time to get through it. Does that work?
That works perfectly. Yep.
Okay. Ben, do you want to go ahead and shoot questions at us, and we'll go ahead and make that the focus of the rest of the time we have?
Sure. Let's rock and roll with questions.
And Ben, if I could just say one thing, about the Alliance Data team that's been really just so impressive. So, I've had the pleasure of jumping in to work with the team and really learn from the Alliance Data team late last fall, I think it was. And, they were well on their journey. And I have to say the attributes that I've really seen at Alliance Data that's really facilitated this growth and this huge business impact is really, high energy, high passion, clarity of goals, right? Every time I talk to Christian and Ahmed, they're always telling me where they stand against their goals. And so I know that it's, very serious for them and for the organization. And just, they're not afraid to think big, right? And really drive towards those big goals. So that's something that I, definitely encourage everyone to pick up as well from the conversation is, think big, focus on those goals and drive that with energy and passion, which is definitely something this team has been great at. So great job.
Appreciate it. And for everyone paying attention, that is Paul's actual house in the background there.
Yeah, this is it. This is where I live.
Yeah. He's committed.
Perfect.
In the background.
Yeah, great comments, Paul. So there's some questions around support. The level of support, is it hard to keep in tabs of things? Can you just talk about support mechanism and what that looks like?
That feels like that's an Ahmed question.
Yes. So today we have 4 resources who are tagged to support. However, since we, one of the things that we have done is went after a big process, not by the quantity, things that really gave us the number of hours or the number of key imperative that we needed to hit the target. We have lesser process, so we have very few issues. Knock on wood. Let's keep it that way. So we have less than 10% of issues that come in, and those support resources actually are tapped on to do additional development when there are no support items out there. So amongst the team of 30, there are 4 resources that are looking at supporting those 17 applications that are there, and then 16 more coming. So as new applications are added, you understand that the support or issues will go up at the same time.
And if I can add, a lot of the issues that we've seen that have required a lot of time, not counting enhancements or things like that, but we have modeled the bots to function similar to how associates do from an information security perspective. And what we tend to see in the support side are password issues, traditional login issues that with an associate is not that big a deal, but in a bot is suddenly a big deal. And so there tends to be more focus on the information security and password reset side, and less on things like interfaces changing. I believe right now we've integrated with 80% of our core systems. So that 16 is somewhat deceptive, right? We're talking about customer information, we're talking about case management, we're talking about a lot of systems that are consistently used across different groups. So not only do we have a small number of large processes, so the 10,000 hours or more focus has helped us mitigate the amount of support required, but also we're touching a lot of the same systems over and over again. So if there is one issue for one process, it tends to be either true everywhere else, or support work for that tends to fix for everybody else. The one that I think is a recurring theme seems to be username and password support. And I don't know, Ahmed, if you wanted to add to that.
Yep, that has been our early state, and initially we saw one of the other questions that I saw is bot development versus about readiness. How did we spend time? So initially we spent more time gathering access, getting it ready, and getting it out to production. However, we have been able to switch that. Now we are probably doing bot development 60%, readiness is 40%, and we take pride on doing that 40% in the readiness, because that gives the business the comfort as they vet the process during the UAT session and figure out if things are working well or not. So that's been working really great for us.
I mean, just to add, maybe a lesson learned, there are a couple questions in here around what did we learn through this process, right? And I think really, I want to sort of echo back to that village, right? In the early days, we struggled a lot and spent a lot of cycles in discussion and sort of talking around bot provision and the bot being able to access the system very similar to an associate, right? So don't underestimate the need for that kind of village and those partners that are really highly engaged and willing to help from a solution and success perspective.
Absolutely, right on. Those relationships are paying off, where we've spent the key time to figure out, how does the bot ID creation happens, very similar to how an associate ID creation happens, and what permissions do they have, and how do we make sure that those are managed in our organization.
I would also add one challenge we ran into quite a bit was the idea of standardized versus not standardized process. Sometimes there is what people believe is the standardized process and what the associates actually do being two different things. And in some cases, we sat with 4 or 5 associates and they were all doing a standardized process the same way, but actually they are all doing it differently. And it might be 2 minutes for one associate and 15 minutes for another. And maybe the person doing 15 minutes is actually doing it right, but everybody's trying to focus on a timeline. And so the 2 minutes is what everyone does. And so another thing that we discovered is really find what the right best process is. And it doesn't just mean, when you're picking your long list of priorities, which process is the right one, but it means when you pick that priority process, how many different versions of it does exist and which one is the right one. And right, not meaning what people tell you, but actually sit with lots of different people, have different people viewing those processes. So shadowing became a pretty big key part of our feasibility studies, and determining, okay, there are 4 versions of the process. These are 4 different timelines. This is 4 different people that have done them. Which one do we all agree? Which are the elements we all agree are the best parts? And then we engage our process agility team to help us look at it and help us make sure that it's the right one that we automate. And if we don't think we can automate the right process, we try to avoid setting that to steering committee. So we try to make sure that we've done enough upfront work to know this is the right process to code, so that we don't end up with a lot of support problems down the road. So I think one way that we've been able to mitigate support challenges too is spending a lot more time up front on the feasibility side, shadowing, and understanding the best right process and not just standard process. Because there's a lot of nuance in what actually gets done that we discovered.
I think 2 of the other questions that I see are, how do you monitor this bot? So it's the support team that's continually monitoring and then creating incidents. The UiPath software, the orchestrator kind of gives a dashboard level view of, where those bots are and if they are running into issues, what those are, and looking at the logs.
There's a question around leadership buy-in. Talk a little bit kind of like from the leadership level, how you're able to get the buy-in, how you got the right folks on the bus. Seeing is that as a important part of making this happen?
So I know Ahmed and I came at it from different directions and different organizations. And so we kind of landed in the same place, but in different ways. So Ahmed is originally from the enterprise delivery world. So their focus was how do we improve operations? How do we generate efficiencies from within the group, right? And then my team, and I'll let Ahmed correct everything I say. And then my team was more focused on this sort of big idea of generating this 30% operational effectiveness across the entire enterprise. So it was, how do we make what we do better within our group versus how do we make everybody else better? And Ahmed's team was doing a great job of figuring out how we do it better in the group. And then we're like, okay, well, how do we make that true everywhere? And a lot of that was business case driven. It was, okay, we reached a point where we've doubled every 5 years, and we realized that there's no way that we can do that again with people the way we have been growing. And so we really looked at, okay, in order for the business to grow over the next 3 to 5 years, what does that mean financially for our operating model? And we really got into the operating model itself, not just how do I save money, bottom up using automation. We said, hey, your growth trajectory of expenses looks like this. And you need it to look like this. And we drew this crocodile. Like I sat in a board meeting with the CEO, and I said, your cost expense looks like this, and you want it to look like this. You want to open the alligator mouth, the crocodile mouth. And I literally sat there in the board meeting doing this and chomping. And she said, I want that. That is what I want. And so what we did was we worked with finance to figure out, okay, in order for this crocodile mouth to open, what does that mean? How many hours of automation do we need to do? And those numbers weren't small, right? Like, we talked about 250,000 hours in the first year. Our first 6-month target was like 70,000 hours. And that had to be actualized in the year. That wasn't annualized or anything like that. We had to have 70,000 in the year. Then it was 600,000. So that's what our goal is this year, which we're going to beat. Then it's 1 million and 1.5 million. They're big numbers. They're not small numbers. And so we said, okay, it's the number's big. And what can you do to get there? And we had to really partner with Paul and Cognizant and other groups to figure that out. So it was very much about we can't function as a business without finding a way to be more effective. And RPA is a way to get there. It's not the only tool we deploy, but it's the one that's driving most of the value. We do some machine learning activities. We have speech transcription services. We have a lot of other ways that we're tackling those numbers, but all the numbers we're citing are from RPA. So, how do we make the crocodile mouth open, and how does the C-level, the C-suite align to that, and how do we make sure that's codified by finance into the numbers, into the books? And that was really how we got buy-in, because all our bonuses are based on hitting certain targets, and the entire organization is now aligned behind our RPA goals because they're codified into our finance books. And I would say that was a real big driver. How do I take the great work Ahmed's doing? How do I apply it to the entire business, and how do I make sure it's codified by finance, and how we hit our goals for the next 3 years? And that really drove it. And the team was small. If you look at the team of us business people that aren't developers, there's like 3 of us, and it's mostly development. Well, that's because it was 10 developers, and then we hit all of our targets and said, okay, we can go bigger. We have more opportunity. What's the next? And we just kept hitting tolls and thresholds, and kept driving more and more against what those finance goals were. And finance really sold our case for us, right? It was, what do you need? And how can we get there? And can we convince you finance that makes sense in the books? And they said, yes, and go do it. And we got what we needed to make it happen.
And
then
in our early
times, I said.
And in our early times, we had our leaders having that acute sense that others in the industry are doing RPA, and we as an Alliance Data are behind the curve, and we need to catch up, right? And having that, and then creating that urgency, and doing that, keeping that vision up in the front, helped us get to it, very, very quickly with the ramp up plan. That is the reason why we went with a service provider rather than trying to develop our own resources who can do the development and then grow there. That would have been another way, but it would not have given us the scale. It would not have given us the benefit as quickly as we have been able to realize in this fashion.
Ahmed, Christian, there's several questions around how do we tackle unstructured text and talk about additional capabilities to pair with RPA. You talk a little bit about the roadmap.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, go ahead, Ahmed. That's all you.
Would you go to the previous slide? Actually, the one before. Yes. So we'll talk about where we are and where we're going. So our key objective next is actually working on hyperautomation, which is AI-based text analytics. We're spending a lot of our time and brain power figuring out how do we deal with the unstructured text that comes to us. We have done in a study within our organization, about 80 to 85% of our information that we get from our card members are in unstructured text, be it the email that they're sending us as a secure message, or the letters that they're writing to us when our card members are getting deployed to active duty. They're sending us their SCRA request. All of those are coming in as unstructured text. So we have proof of value activity going on at the same time to evaluate how and where these use cases make sense and what would be the business case for us to implement. For example, for the email categorization of secure messages, the team has built some custom models, and we have a way forward to go ahead and implement that intelligent automation where we can sense based on the custom model if the card member is asking us to remove their late fee, if they're asking us to close their account. There are 22 different categories. So we're taking the top few and then doing a case study of volumetrics as well as ROI and building the model and getting it ready for a solution. We talked about our legal use case where our counselors were having to look at a contract and they're finalizing what area of the contract needs to be updated, and there are many addendums, there are many parts of the contract. So the keyword search where we are leveraging the NLP and extracting that information, that's playing a big role in there. We're utilizing platforms like Nexidia where our card member calls gets transcribed into text, and we're using those text analytics and passing that information to RPA to go take actions to say, we need to perform this set of actions for our given card member. Let's use that conversation piece and implement that. So hyperautomation and AI-based text analytics is our key focus as we are working through. This was planned for our 2021. However, since we have been able to mature very, very quickly with our RPA and have been able to hit a pretty high target, we have pulled the initiative forward, and we have started working and getting pretty ready to deploy some of the solution as early as next week, and some of the other ones will be deployed in the next month or two.
Yeah, and I want to add, this has been a particularly difficult one for us. We've had a lot of success in task automation. If you listen to the use cases where they talked about, we had to go get this document, we had to attach this document to a case, and they had to do it 15 times. And so the bot's doing all that attaching, identifying and attaching. But what it's not doing is giving you any context, right? It's just grabbing all the information that's needed for the analysis, and then it's giving the documentation to the associate. So they don't have to do all of that digging through different websites and so on. That's a task. And what we want to move to is like workflow automation, right? So how can you broaden the amount of scope that the RPA can do? And understanding the text and the context is really where a lot of that can happen. And where that happens is where the customer is interacting with our systems. And so like Ahmed said, almost all of that's unstructured data. So this has been a nut for us that we want to crack. And if we had a choice between unattended or attended bots and how do we make sure unattended bots get a scale, or how do we solve this text mining and understanding text problem? This one's much bigger because it lets us get the whole workflow understood and potential automation and not just task space within it. And so we sort of shifted our focus away from how do I increase the RPA specific stack to include attended. We spent more time on how do I increase the technology stack to pick up more of the work that's an opportunity. And that goes from task to workflow. And so that's where we've seen text being a big opportunity for us. And going from 250,000 hours to 2.5 million is the difference between task-based and workflow automation. So I think that question is actually the key to what our future looks like within our COE. It's going to be solving that problem. And you got all these weird looks from me because it's been painful.
Oh, this has been fabulous. folks. I can't tell you how there's. I was trying to take notes fast and trying to listen, and lots of lessons to be learned. This notion of let's drive things from business case. Let's think big. Let's make things better for our associates. Let's start small, then let's figure out how to spread it. Lots of little lessons here. So congratulations, folks, for some amazing kind of work. We'll have a recording of this available for folks after, so I'll distribute that. Any last sort of advice for folks? Christian, Ahmed, and Tez, Melissa, Tim, anything else before we close off here?
I will let everyone else give their last thoughts. I did want to say thank you to Paul. I think we wouldn't have been successful without the partnership from UiPath and from a lot of the leadership, especially early on as we started our journey. UiPath has been a huge help to us. Cognizant as well. I don't know if they're on the phone, but we've had a lot of success in partnership with Cognizant. So, Ahmed showed that slide. That's the stool with 3 legs, and one is Alliance, one is Cognizant, one is UiPath. Without a lot of the support and leadership we got out of UiPath and Cognizant, we wouldn't have been successful. So I did want to give a thank you to Paul's on the phone. Like, his picture is the one that I see. So it's reminding me, and then I'll hand it to everybody else for their closing thoughts.
I would say keep your vision, big and go for it. Once you believe in it, you can make others convinced to it, and your leaders will see through it. So just go for it, go big, or go home.
I would agree with Ahmed. I say just, for me, it was building relationships. So just get out there and talk to everybody that you can. I mean, you can't have a bad conversation with anybody about RPA. So throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. And I guarantee if you get one or two couple people on board with you, that it'll spread like wildfire once you start to share what your successes are.
I think the one thing I would add is, from my days of managing process engineers and business analysts, there's like one saying that sort of always rung true to me, which is run the test, right? If you think you have an idea, rather than speculate on it, put together a pilot, run the test, fail fast. If it's not going to work, find out, right? And then you can move on to the next idea.
I'd agree with Tim. I'd say no idea is a bad idea until you get it out there and run with it, and then just keep encouraging your team to bring more, and then you continue to just improve your processes.
And I heard Chris Louderback on the phone. Chris, I know you weren't really officially on the list, but since you spoke up earlier, did you want to give a thought from your point of view?
I think from my perspective, you guys hit it. The internal, just business partner collaboration and that kind of thing has been huge. But I think just, coming from an operations slant, I think the other thing is, sometimes you might have to get some traction first because people maybe are skeptics of it, especially on front line. They might worry it might impact their job, et cetera. But involving them as best you can in the process, I think, is crucial because they're often the ones that might know what some of that, truly that low-hanging fruit is, or that mundane task, or, you're always going to know what the risk stuff is, but some of those other things that associates might benefit from on the front line, maybe you've got to go to them directly. And I think we've tried to do that, and that's helped kind of, formulate a bunch of stuff we've got in the on-deck circle that we might want to explore.
Yeah. Well, this is.
There you go, Ben. Yeah, that's it from our team.
Well, I think I can say on behalf of everyone who's attended, thank you so much. I mean, it's wonderful to see folks that are successful, but even more wonderful who are successful, people who are successful and willing to share it with others so the rest of us can learn. So thank you so much. Thank you for continuing to grow capability and capacity in this area and sharing that. And then I expect in a couple months, 6 months, a year, you'll be talking about how you'll be implementing workflows, not just task automation on a big scale, and a million hours will be a sandbag number at that point.
No sandbag numbers. Thank you for having us.
Carry goals. Yep, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you for having us.
We'll see y'all.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.